So, Sherelle, can you please share a little about your background? What inspired you to support young people, particularly women, in entering the tech industry?
So my name's Sherelle Garwood. I sort of went to uni and did computer science as a degree, which I really, really enjoyed. It wasn't initially what I was meant to do, so it was sort of a bit of a sidestep for me. But I kind of fell in love with tech, and then I went on to do computing education as my PGCE as well. And then recently did my master's in cybersecurity. So a lot of my academic background is within tech. But throughout that time, I was working with young people quite a lot. So I used to work for a children's charity, and then I did some work for social services as well. So I always knew that I loved working with young people. Always knew that I loved tech, and therefore I sort of kind of ended up in teaching. And I started teaching both maths and computer science, and then became a fully fledged computer science teacher. Um, it's really, really interesting to me as a subject, just what we can use tech for and how it's developed over time. And initially, when I started teaching, there were very few girls taking computer science. I'd maybe have one at GCSE, I'd have none at A level. And so it became a real kind of push for me to try and get girls taking computer science and get them interested in the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And from your experience, what are some of the big misconceptions that young women and girls have about working in tech?
There's this kind of stereotype that they think it means to work in tech, and they sort of see it as this really, really antisocial sort of person sitting in a corner coding, coding away in like no social life. And trying to get that misconception changed has been quite difficult actually. I'd say another misconception as well is that they have to be a coder. A
Mm.
lot of them believe that that is the only role within tech, and trying to kind of talk to them about lots and lots of other roles have been quite important. The fact that there is, UX design, and there's like cybersecurity, and the fact that they can work in any industry, it doesn't have to be within tech. So there's lots of misconceptions there. And also from their parents as well, just not knowing what roles there are in tech, just because it is so new as an industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you noticed a shift in the attitudes among young women towards pursuing those tech careers in recent years? And if you have, what do you think is driving that change?
Yeah, I definitely think there's been a change and a shift. We're seeing a lot more girls now doing the subject more than ever, I would say. Definitely not a 50-50 split yet, but it's getting there. Um, I feel like a lot of that is to kind of do with the outreach that's been taking place by a lot of companies, also universities. I used to work as the deputy head of a sixth form, and there's lots of universities that do outreach programs for women in computer science or women who want to go into tech, and lots of the sort of massive companies are also doing that as well. So that's been a huge shift. I also feel like students are starting to see representation more than ever, and they're now seeing kind of high profile women within the tech industry, and it's now becoming something that seems feasible to them, whereas before they weren't ever seeing that, and they wasn't sure that it was something that they could ever do.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think role models is a huge part of it, and just seeing someone that looks like you coming in and talking to you in school or online on social media, it boosts that and makes you think, oh, actually, maybe I could do this. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And despite progress, women are still underrepresented in the tech industry. What do you think are some of the key barriers that are stopping young women from getting into tech today?
I believe that part of it comes from education. We still haven't got that completely right. Computer science education at the moment is quite limited to students who want to code or definitely want to go into sort of machine learning and real sciencey parts of tech. And it means that there's a massive gap for students who maybe want to go into the creative side of tech, and we haven't been able to close that gap yet. I also feel like the stereotype is still there, and as much as we're trying to kind of change that narrative, it still exists.
Yeah.
Students, particularly girls, are often kind of pushed into subjects that would lead to more nurturing careers like health and social care and psychology and sociology, and computer science isn't always something that they think about, or any kind of STEM subject. So I think education has been, a massive barrier for them.
Yeah.
I also feel like their perception of tech in general, the idea that it's going to be really, really male dominated, there's not going to be much diversity, that's really stopping them as well from, pursuing a career in those industries.
Definitely. And you've touched on there the stereotypes and societal expectations really that do play an interest in girls' interest in tech. And we've mentioned changing the narrative. What more do you think can be done? What can we do to change this narrative?
I think we need to, continue to have role models in schools. And I always say that kids can't be what they can't see. And unless we're like continuously saying, actually, here are all these amazing women in tech, unless we're continuously, showing them all of the different fields that they can go into within tech, there's always going to be that barrier there. So I think just continuing to bridge that gap between education and companies to make sure that, people within those fields are going into schools, but also as educators that we're really aware of all the different careers that students can go into. That's also really important.
Definitely. And I think it's all about bringing the career into curriculum,
Yeah,
like talking about it and not just in tech classes, but like you've mentioned, maths, business classes, how can we really not just talk about it when the students in the room are already aware of it, but bring it into other
exactly.
things as well. It's super important. And coming on to the education piece. So as a computer science teacher, what are some of the biggest challenges you see young women facing in the classroom when it comes to engaging with tech subjects? Like, where's that initial point of interest, do you think?
I would say often students can have interest in computer science when they're quite young.
Yeah.
And where we see the biggest shift is when they choose their own subjects, usually around key stage 4. And they have to choose the subject that they're going to do at GCSE. And they often feel like if they pick computer science, they are going to be the only girl within the class. They're going to be outnumbered by boys. There's definitely a lot of like self doubt and a lot of self confidence issues that sort of come to play there. And they kind of want to then follow all the other girls by doing, subjects that typically a girl would do, like health and social care and so forth. So that has been, a massive, massive issue in schools where girls are sort of like, well, yeah, I do quite like computer science, but I don't want to be the only girl in the classroom, and I don't want to just be surrounded by boys. So that's been a big one for us.
Absolutely. And how important do you think formal tech education, so like university degrees, is compared to alternative pathways like apprenticeships and certifications?
I'm a massive advocate for alternative pathways. I feel
Yeah.
like university isn't the only option. And part of my role in sixth form was about, really trying to push those other options to students and get them educated on what it is. And again, apprenticeships is also something that often has a lot of misconceptions around it about the types of students who would go into an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And for some of our students, they do need a more kind of hands-on approach, and that would be most successful for them. Computer science isn't the only pathway. I always say to going into tech, and actually it only sort of looks at a small part of tech, but when
Yeah.
we're thinking of all of the other creative parts, apprenticeships are great for that and other pathways as well.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And I think for those students, and particularly girls that perhaps don't want to just study and want to get out there into the world of work, I think it's such an amazing alternative. So I totally agree with you. And the demand for skills, it kind of links into this. The demand for digital skills is higher than ever. So how would you say that young women can really take advantage of this? We need more tech careers, we need more digital careers or skills in this country. How can women take advantage of this to really secure a career in tech?
I think at the moment there's so many different pathways that people can go down just because there is such a demand for it. So I think really kind of Googling it and getting to know some of these companies who are offering these alternative pathways, and having a go at it because they might realize that there's something in tech that they find really, really interesting. There's a
Yeah,
specific part, and there's lots and lots of different ways. They don't have to go back to university and retrain in any way. Like they can go straight into companies. There's lots and lots of programs at the moment for like career changes as well. And
yeah,
I always feel like you're never too old to get
no.
into a career in tech. Like it's never too late at all.
No, definitely not. And I think looking at the total talent in the UK is going to be a big way of us bridging that skills gap for sure, especially the digital one. You know, it's great that young people are being, made aware of these careers, but ultimately, like you said, there's career changes, there's older people who are looking to get into this as well that we should
Yeah.
definitely support on that journey. So many women may lack confidence, they might lack confidence, they might lack the qualifications to enter tech. How can certifications help to bridge that gap and provide tangible career opportunities, do you think?
I think it can really help to give them the skills that is needed for a particular career. And I've definitely seen that sort of recently in the rise of like UX design, for example, being able to take those certifications and get them on board, it actually makes them really, really suited to that particular career. So they're not really feeling like they have to go back and retrain in like an entire new concept because computer science is so big, but actually being really, really specific about what they want to do,
Yeah,
and that being able to lead them straight into the industry. And I think the really great thing about some of the certifications that we've got out at the moment is that that can directly land you a job and it's giving you real world experience as opposed to just kind of the abstract knowledge that we're used to when studying.
yeah. And what advice would you give to a young woman who's interested in tech but just does not know where to start?
I would say looking online is probably the best place to
Yeah,
start. There are incredible initiatives around at the moment, and incredible programs around that is helping people to make that transition, particularly for career changes. And I know that can often seem really, really daunting, doing a career for sort of 10 years or so, and now you're looking to change and thinking, oh my gosh, where do
yeah,
I start? There's so much for career changes. So I think having a look at it, having a look at a lot of the groups as well that have recently started, like Code First Girls and stuff like that,
yeah.
and looking to see what it is that you actually want to do in tech, like continue to research on all of the different areas and see what most suits you.
Yeah, and I also think, LinkedIn is a great platform where you can follow people and look for role models. And I'd also say sometimes it's good to rule things out. Like you said, look at the different types of tech, look at the different things you can be doing, and maybe do like a yes column and a no column. What areas do you
Exactly.
want to, what areas interest you and what don't? Because I always think sometimes it is easier to rule stuff out rather than focus on
100%.
one that you actually like. So no, totally agree with that advice. And
I agree.
we've touched on briefly the culture and representation in tech and, young women. And do you think that tech companies are doing enough to create a really inclusive environment for women? And if not, what more could be done?
I think more could always be done. I think they're definitely making a start and they're heading in the right direction. There's lots of initiatives to try and get women into tech, but again, it's about changing the culture that's already there. I think flexible working is probably quite a big thing in this day and age as well, and making that most suited to the people that you really need in your company. And sometimes, going into a new career or trying to change career and going into tech, it can seem really daunting because you always feel like you're trying to put yourself out there, but actually these companies need you so much more.
Yes,
They really want to have women in tech. So I think speaking to the women in tech and getting them to really help to kind of push new initiatives, continue to go to universities, but also actually reach out to career changers, and try to, build new initiatives to help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important, the role models piece. How important would you say that is to have role models and mentors, and where can people find them?
Yeah, massively important. We need to see those women, and we need to hear their voices, and we need to hear their stories of how they got into tech. And not only are they massive role models, but they're also really change makers as well. And they make such a dent within their industry and helping women to come on board. So I feel like it's incredibly important, and it's something that helps people going into the industries all the time and having a mentor. And I feel like LinkedIn is a great place to find women in tech, as you said. And there are so much people who are kind of willing to help, and they all want the same thing. They want to see a lot more diversity in tech. So yeah, they're always great to reach out to.
I think LinkedIn's a great place for groups as well. And you can hashtag and search, and like you mentioned there, there's groups for coding for girls, and women who code. And I think the people that are in those groups, seeing them come out of it, and they're going to then be role models. And yeah, I think there's going to be a real cycle of people going back into their old schools and universities, and building a whole pipeline of amazing young girls that want to get into tech.
Yeah.
So if you could change one thing, to inspire the next generation about the way that young women are introduced into tech, what would it be?
Um, I think as an educator, I would always start from education, because everyone's going through that. I would
Yeah.
say at the moment there's a massive focus on kind of all of the technical aspects of being in tech. And I love that as a computer scientist. Like, it's so enjoyable to me. But actually, there needs to be more of a focus on what that looks like in careers. A lot of students didn't realize that they could work in fashion and be in tech. They could work in sports and be in tech. And I think being able to show students what this looks like in industries that they love is really, really important. Showing them what it looks like in terms of social media, for example. And I think that will really open kind of the gates of lots of students, or a lot more students who would actually want to come in and study the subject. So I think at the moment, computer science is really limited. For students, if they don't like coding, they're a little bit like, that's not for me. When actually there's so much more pathways out there. So I would love for us to kind of redesign and redevelop what that looks like in education.
Definitely. I think the curriculum's a place where there can be so much inspiration taken from young people,
Yeah.
and getting it into the classrooms, like you've said, and amplifying the message and getting the role models into that would be huge. Um, so finally, what's one piece of advice you would give to a young woman considering a career in tech, but that's just feeling a bit unsure about taking that leap?
I would say 100% go for it. I think every company thrives on like diversity of thought, and tech
Hmm.
needs more women. Like, they desperately need more women. And the only
Yeah,
way to kind of change the culture is for us to be in there. And the only way that it's going to be representative of us, and we know that tech is kind of feeding into every element of our life, and for it to be representative of women, like, we have to be in there, and we have to be making those decisions as well, and we have to be changing the perspective of those companies. So I'd say 100% go for it. There will be something in tech that you really love. You just need to find it.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sherelle. I think your answers there are so inspiring, and I know a lot of young girls are thinking about it, but we need more young women to come into the space, and learn more about tech. So thank you so much for your time.